Hello, this is Chapter 8 Strengths and Evidence-Based Helping Strategies. In this chapter, we are going to look at 4 different types of therapies and how they are more strengths and evidence-based and how they are helpful in working with people with addictions. So we will cover that as well as talk a little bit about group therapy and some common characteristics amongst these different types of strategies. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. Something important to keep in mind is, we focus more on strengths than we do on weaknesses or liabilities not because they're more true, the strengths are more true, but because that is the pathway to change. I know we've covered this a couple of times in other lecture videos, is that if you don't have something to work towards or something positive, that you're kind of focused on, you're not going to keep moving forward. You're going to lose track of that motivation. So that's why we focus on strengths rather than on weaknesses or liabilities. There is a slogan in Alcoholics Anonymous that says, "Don't give up until the miracle happens." So that's kind of, a motto to live by, is that you're going to keep moving forward and, wait for that miracle to happen, wait for that change, wait for that positive thing to happen. So with that slogan, they're looking for promoting hope no matter how many times a person relapses or how many times a person hits rock bottom. There are strategies in this chapter the 4 strategies that we're going to cover in this chapter share 5 different characteristics, or 4 characteristics rather. So I'm going to go over those with you. They are all strengths-based, so they're all positive. They're all looking for strengths in the client. Second one is choice. The client has choice about the goals of the helping relationship, informed choice about a variety of treatment contexts, whether it be groups, individuals, day treatment, inpatient, etc., and choice about treatment methods, whether it be cognitive behavioral, 12-step approach, solution-focused. They have a choice on that. They're looking at options. And for many, there are not many options. So you're looking at that particular client situation and looking to see what options are available for them. Paying attention to readiness for change. You want to make sure that you are looking at the client's clues that they are giving you. They may not even realize they're giving you clues, or that they're showing that they're ready for change or not showing that they're ready for change. But as your role as a therapist or a worker working with someone, you want to pay attention to those cues. Change is a process on a continuum that moves from unwillingness to considering making changes and then actually acting on the behaviors, as we've discussed before. So the 4 strengths-based approaches that we are going to cover in this chapter are harm reduction, motivational interviewing, solution-focused therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. And then we're going to talk a little bit about group therapy at the end there, which is the most common form of therapy for addiction treatment, whether it be inpatient or outpatient settings. We're also going to take a look at the most common set of strategies that are still in use today, whether, kind of like following this continuum of detox treatment and then aftercare. And, most facilities, 75% of them offering only abstinence as the goal, although things are changing. We mentioned the United States is the most reluctant to jump onto the harm reduction. Also, when you go to work on your discussion board question and your written assignment questions, I'm going to have you review a case of Roxanne Smith. So there's going to be a little bit of insight about her, and then there's going to be some questions based off of, your thoughts and input on Roxanne's case. So that'll be your written assignment for this chapter, and then your discussion board will have some follow-up questions about this case. So I just wanted to make note of that. So make sure you guys are doing that and following that. All right, let's start with harm reduction. So harm reduction, we've talked about a couple times, it is a way to kind of work where the client is. We might be reducing something or using something in moderation. Abstinence is not the goal for harm reduction. It's used by public health to describe any intervention that improves public health, like education or clean needles. So it's doing something to help, even if it's not necessarily abstinence as the goal. All right. Again, the United States is not crazy about harm reduction models, but we're working towards that. We do have some models in place, such as Suboxone programs and methadone programs, but we're a little bit behind the way. Abstinence may be the best option for people in addiction. Obviously, that's our, that could be our end game goal altogether. However, for opiate dependent people, abstinence is effective only for people who are motivated, people who have stable living conditions, and people who have social supports. If you don't have those three things, it makes abstinence a really hard thing to obtain if you don't have them. So some ways with harm reduction that we reduce barriers is, is part of the harm reduction process. So some of the barriers that people may face are programs that are not accessible to those who need services, depending on where in the community you live. Maybe you're not easily accessible to where that treatment program is. Staff who know little about the culture of addicts and addiction, maybe they don't know enough information to work with them or have enough insight on it. There's waiting lists, costs. Some treatment facilities still have that goal of abstinence, and that could be a barrier for some. Waiting in a waiting room, intake paperwork, we talked about in screening and assessment, kind of like that initial question thing can be bombarding for people. Municipalities that discourage syringe exchanges, so they may not have that program option. And methadone provided only in methadone clinics that require strict compliance, unlike in other countries where, maybe you don't have to be as compliant to that. So there's also ways with harm reduction that we are trying to outreach to reduce some of those barriers. As you may have noticed across the span of all these chapters that we've been reviewing, some of these barriers we keep hearing over and over again. So the goal is to try to reduce some of those barriers. You could provide education materials, pamphlets, taking care of yourself, taking care of your health, where you could go for certain things, such as maybe Narcan, or, where to go if you're looking for detox. Free food, clothing, hygiene products. There are ways you could offer free syringes or syringe dispensing machines, needle exchanges, mobile vans, maybe to help take people to and from places, multiple points of entry, whether or not, like that being with treatments. So maybe you're not necessarily going there just right away to jump into treatment, but maybe you're going to meet with someone, kind of build rapport with that person, and then you're going to start on that focus of treatment. So actually being able to sit down and have somebody listen to the person. Some criminal justice approaches. There was the street-based diversion in Seattle. That was the lead program. And in Massachusetts, you could walk into any police station and receive a referral for treatment. So that was some ways that the criminal justice was trying to use harm reduction as a way to help addicts. Some other strategies that are helpful in this type of therapy, rapid intake, co-location with other services, maybe like primary health care or mental health services, over-the-counter and nicotine replacement therapies like patches. I mentioned before that sometimes when you see these outpatient facilities, you have a group of people huddled all together, everybody's smoking. So maybe offering, nicotine replacement might be an option. Tolerant zones with clean needles, condoms, healthcare could be a possible option. Free coupons for treatment, including free methadone treatment. I don't know if they are still available. I haven't checked into this, but I know that there used to be coupons online for Suboxone, for your prescription of Suboxone. So that would be a way to kind of help people enter treatment, stay with treatment, and get the medicine that they need. So who chooses and how? The hallmark of harm reduction practice is that the professional counselors respect the thoughts, opinions, goals of the client. That is the goal. So a client gets to determine how they engage, whether they are going to engage in treatment, and what supportive services they may be in need of, such as housing, food, counseling, education, work, social opportunities, stuff like that. An abstinence-only model is in direct conflict with the principle of self-determination because the consumer is required to stop using the substance or enter a treatment program with the goal in mind to stop everything, to stop using that substance before they can have any of those supportive services, such as the housing, employment, counseling, food, etc. So again, the client gets to decide the goals. They get to decide in what order they're going to work on things. And it's supposed to, be a little bit more helpful and a little bit less difficult for the client to engage in services. We mentioned one of those themes across these strength and evidence-based strategies is readiness to change. So how can we gauge a person and whether or not they're ready to change? All harm reduction strategies are based on a common assumption that people are ultimately capable of making an informed choice on their own best interests, and the choices that they make depend on their readiness to change and what stage of change that they are in. Just some personal thoughts that I've had on this is I have seen some people at some of their worst moments. And I could argue this statement both ways because I don't necessarily understand how somebody who comes in very intoxicated is kind of able to make those informed choices. However, on the flip side of that, they're making the best choice at that moment. So whether or not they're high and they don't really comprehend everything what choice that they're committing to or that they're making to, but they're still making the best choice at that particular moment. What I've seen is that people when they come into treatment and they are intoxicated, they are less likely sometimes to kind of follow through with things. Like they may have made that choice while they were high, but then like the next day, if they sober up or after they've come down from something, that may not still be the same goal or same choice in mind. So that's why I can kind of see both sides of that. But it's definitely something to be aware of to kind of gauge their readiness of change. They want what they want when they want it. That is true of all addiction. I mean, that instant gratification, keep in mind, when they want that high, they want that high. So they're using that drug to get that high. We've talked about the stages of change in an earlier lecture video: the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. So I'm not going to go over those again. However, I do want you to note that most people do start in stage 1, pre-contemplation. You may not be seeing them in that particular stage sometimes when you're working with them, but most people start in that stage. Most people are in denial before they actually take the steps that they need to make the change. If we are doing treatment with a person, we need to know how to work with people in the pre-contemplation stage, especially if those have been forced into treatment by family, an employer, or the legal system, because that does happen quite often. There's so much information out there that's convincing us that the person has to be in the action stage to have success, and that doesn't necessarily have to be true. You could have success with a person in a pre-contemplation stage. It's going to take more work, but it is possible. And if we fall for that you can only be in the action stage to have success, we're using strategies that don't match where the client needs are, or where they are in treatment, or where their readiness to change are. We are trained to think motivation to change is essential. They have to want to change. They have to hit rock bottom. But, there is little relationship between a client's motivation at the entry of treatment and the outcomes of treatment 6 months later. So maybe, again, the motivation isn't there, but eventually you kind of work towards getting that motivation. That's part of the whole process of listening to the client and letting them dictate where they want to be. Tough love, too, is another approach you may have heard of. The problem is that it doesn't work, and it feels awful to everyone, and especially to the family members or friends around the person who is in addiction. Tough love is a hard approach for everybody because we don't want to see our loved ones struggle. Change usually occurs in small steps over time, so don't expect big miracles in one big step. And I kind of have, a conflicting view on this, but Denning, one of the researchers in your textbook, says advises not to celebrate success. Avoiding the cycle of hope and despair. Instead, today is a good day, but tomorrow may not be. And I kind of struggle with that sometimes because as the positive person that I am and a very strength-based, motivated person, I like to celebrate success because I feel like, again, if we're encouraging this person to focus on their strengths, focus on their motivation, focus on being positive, maybe not that big forever statement, but we're focusing on, okay, we're going to work towards this little goal. We're going to achieve this. If you don't celebrate that success, how is that person going to understand or comprehend that they did something well? Denning's view on it is that if we celebrate all these successes and then something happens right after, then we're kind of eliminating that process of, you bring somebody up with hope and then they come crashing down, kind of a thing. And I guess this is more so for the families. and friends around them too. But I kind of could go either way on that, but just some food for thought with that. Some harm reduction strategies, figuring out what harms we want to reduce with the person. Is it HIV? Is it other health issues? Is it the risk of getting drugs, like their methods of getting drugs, whether it be prostituting themselves or, stealing money? Loss of freedom in the legal system, loss of employment, loss of custody of their children, or, homelessness too. There was a Canadian shelter that provided healthcare support and 1 drink per hour if the person wanted it to people with a mean age of 51 and an average of 35 years of alcoholism. So I thought that was kind of crazy that they're providing like that drink. You get 1 drink per hour if you stay in this shelter in Canada. What they found was that emergency room visits, police encounters decreased, and hygiene improved, and patients drink less. So harm reduction, again, showing that it works. Some thoughts on harm reduction psychotherapy. This is a collection of clinical principles that guide the practitioner on how to view the consumer and how to create the helping relationship while selecting various interventions. There's actually a list of these on page 326 in your textbook if you would like to reference that. This helps the therapist work from an equal perspective, and it is more of a collaborative approach. And there's an interesting quote on the bottom of page 326. It's natural to want to punish people for making choices we don't agree with when they are making them over and over. If you're not practicing harm reduction, there's a lot more confrontation. Your role is more parental. So I just thought that was something interesting that I wanted to kind of point out. The biggest thing with harm reduction too is if the client refuses services, keep offering them. Don't give up. Don't get discouraged. Just keep offering them because eventually they may want those services. Moving on to motivational interviewing. So motivational interviewing is credited to the student interns in Norway of William Miller as he demonstrated how he would work with clients in various settings. Motivational interviewing has been adapted to motivational enhancement therapy in Project Match of 1997. So how we would describe motivational interviewing is its client-centered, directive method for enhancing motivation to change by exploring and resolving ambivalence. Motivational interviewing assumes that the state of motivation may fluctuate from time to time or situation to situation, and that motivation itself has several different components with distinctly different meanings. There is a motivation of desire, a motivation of ability, motivation based on reasons for change, motivation based on need, and the motivation signals commitment that signals commitment to change. So when we do motivational interviewing, we're focusing on a client's motivation to make a change. You're looking for their own motivation and their own level of commitment to change rather than getting them to admit that they have a problem or putting motivation in for them. If we try to get a client to give the reasons that they should change, they dig their heels and they're going to be very resilient towards it. That's where we see that denial and that resistance to treatment. But in motivational interviewing, you're helping them explore, what are they ambivalent toward? What are their issues? What are their problems that they're identifying? And, are they willing to do the steps that they need to do to resolve the problem? So you're constantly kind of putting it back on, I don't want to say it like that. You're not necessarily putting it on them, but you're putting it back on them as far as what they want to work on so that you're not looking like the bad guy at the end of the day, because if you set up their goals, you set up their motivation, they're going to be less likely to work on it. Like solution-focused therapy, it starts with a desire to want to change. The same thing as the mottos for going to Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous meetings. You have the desire to change is there. So what does the client want? The desire. How do you want things to be different? And then the ability. If you did decide to quit or cut back, how could you do it? What are the ways that you would feel comfortable doing it? What are your reasons? What might be the reasons for you to change? Is it for yourself? Is it for your child? Is it so you don't go to jail? Is it for probation? What is it? Your need. How important is that change to you? How much do you want it? And your commitment. What do you think you will do? What are you willing to commit to start making those steps of change? So we assess motivation with scaling questions. So a scaling question, an example of a scaling question would be like on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being not motivated at all, 10 being extremely motivated. Where would you rank yourself on motivation to want to start your addiction treatment? So a client may say, well, I feel like a 5 right now. Okay, well, what would it take to get you to be a 6? Why are you not a 4? You can ask a lot of follow-up questions with scaling questions. Definitely a big thing with follow-up questions, so scaling questions, because you want, like, they're giving you, usually like that immediate response, and you want to kind of dig to find out, well, why did they give you that answer, and why is it that number versus a different number? 5 techniques to working with motivational interviewing: empathy, develop discrepancy between present problem and goal, avoid arguments. You do not argue with clients about giving up their dependence. Denial is not relevant, and trying to break through the person's denial is likely to increase their resistance to working with you. So instead, questions like, what do you want to do about it? Roll with resistance. It's up to you, seen as natural. I would have people come in and they would say, well, I think I'm going to go and I'm going to drink on my 21st birthday. Maybe alcohol wasn't their drug of choice. Maybe heroin was, but I encouraged them, okay, well, so you want to make that choice, but are you aware of, how could that impact you, or how could that impact your recovery? So roll with the resistance, give them the tools that they need to make the choice. Support confidence that they can change, provide hope. Self-explanatory there. The book references closing the deal section on page 331. So you're asking the client, what changes are you thinking about making? So that's kind of how you're wrapping up the sessions with them is, okay, so we've talked, we've instilled hope, we've got the motivation. What are you willing to do? If you're not ready, I don't want you to make a commitment. And don't underestimate ambivalence. The commitment to change may and will probably waver. So they may be committed one day, but not committed the next day. Motivational enhancement therapy. Share with your client your assessment of their situation, including inconsistencies if there are any. Sometimes when we work with people in addiction, they have a tendency to be poor historians. Not because they want to lie to you, but that is a possibility. But sometimes they have those missing gaps of information in their stories. So there may be inconsistencies in what they're telling you. So be aware of them and make them understand that, hey, this doesn't sound completely right to me. I feel like I'm missing something. Can you help me better understand? Provide information comparing them with others, where they stand in the big picture of things so that they can come to their own conclusions. Most people have this. Most people are experiencing this. That's one of the better benefits of group therapy, because they get to see that their behavior is like those of others around them. Research on effectiveness of motivational interviewing, it has definitely been studied a lot. There's over 200 randomized clinical trials as of 2013. Small to medium effect, stronger in addiction than any other problem. So better for this than like maybe mental health. But some studies show no significant differences. One combines motivational interviewing with cognitive behavioral therapy, and it showed small but significant effect. It's just some thought about that. There were some difficulties in research design, such as the variability of method, the skills of the therapist, stuff like that could be a barrier, or could impact the research studies. Sorry. The form that one study found effective with a sample of 727 college freshmen was motivational interviewing with feedback. So, that was what one research study had found. So I'm going to stop us there for motivational interviewing, and in the next lecture video, we're going to pick up with solution-focused therapy. So stay tuned. Thank you.